The world of Vareen was full of light and color. The air shimmered with silver mist that drifted across tall towers made of crystal. The people of Vareen moved with grace, their skin faintly glowing in shades that matched the skies Lyraean stood, at the balcony of the council hall looking down at the wide streets below where hundreds of citizens gathered to listen to her words. She was young but known for her calm mind and her gentle way of speaking. The council had chosen her to speak to the people about the rumors that were spreading fast across their world. Rumors of strange beings who called themselves humans, beings from a distant planet who had begun to appear across other star systems. Some said they were dangerous, others said they were lost travelers searching for new homes. No one knew the truth, and fear had begun to grow in the hearts of many. Lyraean tried to calm the crowd. Her voice carried through the air, clear and soft. She told them that fear was not the way forward, that Vareen had always stood as a place of peace and knowledge. She said they would learn more before deciding what to think. The people listened, though some faces showed doubt. She could feel their unease like a wave moving through the crowd. When she spoke, she tried to sound sure. Even though her own heart was filled with questions, she had never seen a human herself, only heard stories of what they could do. Some stories said they could destroy whole fleets with a single ship. Others said they were capable of kindness and understanding that few could match. The council hall was large and bright. The walls were made of a living crystal that pulsed with gentle light. The councillors sat in a half-circle behind Lyraean, their faces serious. They were older than her, wiser perhaps, but none had her connection to the people. That was why they had asked her to speak. A voice from behind called her name, and she turned. It was Councillor Arelon, his face stern. He told her the scouts had returned from the outer orbit. They had seen something strange and silent hovering above their world. Lyraean felt her breath catch. She asked what it was, but he only said she should come and see for herself. She followed him through the long corridors of the hall. The air grew cooler as they went deeper until they reached the observation chamber. From there, they could see the sky above the planet, a vast dome of stars. One of the screens shimmered and focused on a single shape, hanging in orbit. It was long and dark, made of metal, unlike anything from Vareen. The others in the room spoke quietly among themselves. They said it matched the old descriptions of human ships. Lyraean stared, unable to look away. The ship was not large, but it had a presence, a feeling of power and mystery. It moved slowly, as if watching, waiting. The alarms began to sound across the capital. A deep note rolled through the city, and lights flashed across the towers. The people below looked up, pointing to the sky. Some began to run, others simply stood frozen. Lyraean felt her voice fail her. She had been about to speak to the crowd again, to tell them everything was fine, but the words would not come. A messenger rushed in, saying the ship had sent no signal, no message, no sign of intent. It had appeared suddenly, as if from nothing, then remained silent. The council gathered quickly. Everyone spoke at once. Some demanded they raise the shields around the planet. Others said they should send a message of peace before it was too late. Lyraean listened, trying to understand the fear and reason behind their voices. She thought of what she had told the people only moments ago about patience and peace. Now she was not sure if she believed her own words. She looked again at the image of the ship, dark and still against the stars. She wondered what kind of beings could travel so far alone. What did they want? What were they waiting for? Outside the great hall, the city grew restless. Markets closed early and families hurried indoors. The lights of the towers dimmed one by one until only the council hall shone brightly above the city. Lyraean stood by the window watching the dark sky. A cold wind swept through the open arches. The world, that had always felt safe and bright, now seemed small beneath the shadow of that single ship. As night came, the sky changed color. The thin clouds above Vareen turned silver and blue, reflecting the light of the ship's engines. The council had sent several drones to approach it, but each one had lost signal before getting close. No weapon was fired. No warning came. The silence was worse than any attack. It was a silence that seemed to watch them, to judge them. Lyraean felt the weight of it in her chest. She could not sleep. She stayed by the window for hours listening to the distant hum of the city below. She thought of the humans again. The stories said they were a race that had risen from chaos and ruin. They had fought wars that had nearly destroyed their home, yet they had survived. They had learned to cross the stars not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to give up. Lyran wondered if that was true. If so, maybe they were not here to harm. Maybe they were, searching for something, a new beginning, a sign of hope. Her heart wanted to believe that even as her mind told her to fear. Before dawn, the first light touched the towers of Vareen. The ship was still there. Unmoving, Lyran went to the council chamber. Again, most of the others had not slept either. They looked pale and tense. Councillor Arelon spoke first, saying the people demanded answers. The council decided they would try to send a message to the ship using the oldest known human language from their records. Lyran offered to speak the message herself. She felt it was her duty as the envoy of her people. The others agreed, though some warned her it could be dangerous. She stood before the communicator and took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she began to speak. The words were slow and careful. Greetings from the world of Vareen. We come in peace. We seek to understand, not to fight. There was no reply. The silence stretched until she began to think the message had failed. Then, the lights flickered across the console and a signal returned. It was a voice deep and calm, speaking the same words back in the same language. We come in peace. We seek to understand, not to fight. The entire room fell silent. The human voice continued, identifying itself as Captain Daniel Ross of the Terran ship Aurora. He said they had come alone to establish peaceful contact with the people of Vareen. He asked for permission to communicate further and to share information about their worlds. Lyran felt her fear slowly fade, replaced by curiosity and something like hope. She turned to the council, waiting for their answer. They spoke quietly among themselves before agreeing to continue the exchange. As the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, Lyran looked up once more at the sky. The human ship was still there, but now it seemed less like a threat and more like a promise. The people of Vareen watched from their homes and streets, whispering the name of the visitors who had come from the stars. Lyran stood quietly, feeling the start of something new. She did not know what the future would bring, but for the first time since the ship appeared, she felt that maybe, just maybe, this meeting could change everything. The morning after the human message, the city of Vareen was quiet. The people had stopped panicking, but the fear still lived beneath their calm eyes. The great ship still floated above their world, unmoving, but its shadow seemed to stretch across every heart. Lyran walked through the halls of the council building, listening to the whispers that filled the corridors. The council had decided to continue speaking with the humans, and a place was being prepared for their arrival. They were to send a small team down to the surface to meet with the leaders of Vareen. It was the first time in history that any being from another world would set foot on their soil. Lyran was chosen to greet them. It was not a surprise to her, but it still made her heart beat faster. She had spoken first to the human captain, and now she would be the first to meet them face to face. She stood before the mirror in her room, looking at her reflection. Her skin shimmered softly under the light. Her eyes, bright and uncertain. She wondered what the humans looked like and how they spoke. Would they be kind or cold? Would they see her people as equals or as curiosities? She tried to clear her thoughts and remember her duty to represent her world with grace and peace. High above the planet, the human ship Aurora prepared for descent. Captain Daniel Ross stood on the bridge, looking out at the shining world below. The air on Vareen glowed like a sea of light, and he could see the great towers reaching toward the sky. He turned to his first officer, Maria Brooks, who was checking the landing coordinates. She said the atmosphere was stable and the landing zone was secure. The captain nodded and gave the order to begin. The landing craft detached from the main ship and slowly entered the planet's sky, leaving a faint trail of silver fire behind. When the ship appeared above the capital, a wave of sound spread through the city. People came out to see it, though they kept a safe distance. The landing craft touched down in the open square before the council hall. The air shimmered with heat as the engines cooled and the ramp lowered. Slowly, 3 figures stepped out wearing dark suits that reflected the light. They moved with calm and purpose, their faces hidden behind clear visors. Lyrian walked forward with 2 guards behind her. The moment felt unreal. Every step she took echoed in her ears. She stopped a few meters away and waited. The first human removed his helmet and took a slow breath of the warm air. His hair was dark and his eyes calm. He smiled slightly before speaking. His voice was firm but gentle. He said his name was Daniel Ross, captain of the Aurora, and he thanked the people of Vereen for welcoming them. Lyrian bowed her head slightly and introduced herself. She said she spoke for her world and welcomed him and his crew to their home. The air between them was filled with quiet respect and curiosity. It was the beginning of something neither side had ever imagined. The council had prepared a chamber for the meeting. It was a wide room filled with soft light from the living crystals in the walls. The human visitors looked around with wonder as they entered. The colors shifted slowly like the breathing of the planet. Itself, Lyran guided them to the long table at the center where the council members waited. Captain Ross spoke first, explaining that Earth was a distant world, one of many that had survived great wars and changes. He said humanity had learned to seek peace, but also knew how to defend itself. He wanted to understand the people of Vereen, not to harm them. The council listened carefully, asking questions about Earth, its history, its people, and its reason for traveling so far. Ross answered with honesty, saying that exploration had always been a part of what made humans human. He told them about the oceans that covered most of Earth, about the forests and deserts, and about the stars that humans dreamed of reaching long before they had the power to do so. Lyrian watched him as he spoke. His eyes carried a quiet strength, a sense of loss and hope mixed together. She began to understand that humans were not as simple as the stories had said. Maria Brooks spoke next, showing small items, from Earth samples of plants and simple tools that explained how their people lived. She told stories of ordinary lives of families, children, and music. The council was surprised to hear that humans could find beauty in small things despite the hardships they had faced. Lyrian felt drawn to their honesty. Their words were not coated with pride or fear. They spoke as travelers who had seen both darkness and light and had chosen to keep moving forward. As the day passed, the humans and Vereen shared stories about their worlds. The council told them about the history of Vereen, how their ancestors had built their shining cities from the crystals of the planet, how they had learned to live in balance with their environment and avoid war. For generations, Captain Ross listened with admiration, saying that Earth had once tried the same but had failed many times before, learning through mistakes. He said that was why humans valued peace so deeply, because they had known the pain of losing. Outside the chamber, crowds gathered to watch from a distance. The meeting had become a symbol of hope for both worlds. Lyrian could feel the weight of it on her shoulders, but she also felt pride. She had been part of something that might change history. When the meeting ended, she walked with Captain Ross through the garden outside the hall. The air was cool and full of glowing petals that floated gently around them. She asked him if he feared coming here alone. He said yes, but that fear was part of every great step humanity ever took. He said courage was not the absence of fear but the will to move forward. Despite it, Lyrian smiled at his words. She told him that her people believed something similar, that peace was not the lack of danger but the choice to face it with open hearts. For a moment they stood in silence, watching the twin suns sinking behind the towers of the city. The light bathed everything in gold and silver. Ross looked at the view and said it was the most beautiful world he had ever seen. Lyrian felt a warmth in her chest that she did not understand, but she said nothing. When night came, the humans returned to their ship, promising to send more data and return for another meeting. The people of Vereen watched as the small craft lifted into the sky and disappeared into the light of the stars. Lyrian stayed outside long after the ship was gone. She looked up and thought about what they had learned. The humans were not what she had expected. They were strong but also fragile, full of pain but also hope. She realized that the meeting was not just about peace between worlds, but about understanding what it meant to exist in a vast and lonely universe. She turned and walked back toward the quiet halls of the council. The night was calm, but she knew it would not last long before the humans had come. Her people had lived without fear. Now that had changed. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of new light. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered to herself that maybe their worlds were not so different after all. Maybe both carried the same desire to be seen, to be understood, to survive, and to find meaning among the stars. The days after the first meeting passed slowly. The human ship remained in orbit, and small signals were exchanged every few hours, sharing small details about each world. The people of Vareen began to relax a little, and the fear that had spread across the cities started to fade. The markets reopened, and the streets filled again with soft music and light. Even so, a quiet tension still lived beneath the calm. Some did not trust the humans, and believed they were hiding something. Others thought. This meeting was the start of a new age. Lorraine walked among the people every morning, listening to their voices and answering their questions as best she could. She wanted to believe that peace was possible, but she knew that not everyone shared that hope. Inside the great ship Aurora, Captain Daniel Ross worked with his crew to analyze the data they had received from Vareen. He was impressed by their world, by the way they had balanced life and technology without destroying their home. He thought of Earth and how humans had struggled to do the same. Maria Brooks watched the recordings of their first meeting again and again. She said that Lyraean seemed honest and curious, but there was something behind her eyes. Something like worry. Ross agreed. He knew that even if the Vareen wanted peace, there would be others among them who feared what humanity might bring. Late one evening, another transmission came from the council. They invited Ross and his crew to attend a cultural exchange, where both sides would show parts of their history and traditions. Ross agreed at once, saying it would be an honor to learn more about them. He hoped it would help build trust. The next day, the humans descended again to the capital and were greeted by thousands of citizens who watched from a safe distance. The gathering was held in a wide open plaza filled with light and music. The air carried the scent of sweet flowers and soft wind instruments played by Vareen musicians. Lyran met Ross at the entrance of the plaza. She smiled, though her eyes showed she had not slept much. They walked together through the crowd, while Maria and the others followed behind. The Vareen had prepared a display showing their art, their science, and their history. On large glowing panels, the humans watched with wonder as images of ancient Vareen cities filled the air, showing how their ancestors had come together after long ages of struggle and had built their peaceful civilization. Lyran explained that her people had once fought wars long ago, but had learned that unity was stronger than fear. When it was the humans' turn, Ross spoke to the crowd about Earth. He showed them images of blue oceans, green forests, and great cities. He told them of how humanity had once come close to destroying itself through war and greed, but had survived and learned to rebuild. He said that was why they had left their world, not to conquer but to understand. He spoke simply, without pride, only truth. His words carried through the plaza, and even those who doubted listened in silence. When he finished, many of the Vareen applauded softly, their hands glowing with faint light as a sign of respect. After the ceremony, Ross and Lyraean sat by a quiet pool surrounded by crystal flowers. They talked about their worlds and their people. Ross told her about the stars humans had seen, the worlds they had passed, the silence between them. He said space was vast and lonely, and that sometimes even the smallest connection could mean everything. Lyraean listened closely and told him that her people believed every star carried a story, and that maybe their meeting was one of them. For a while they forgot the tension around them and spoke like old friends. But not everyone shared their peace. Deep beneath the surface of Vareen, in hidden chambers, a group of counselors and soldiers met in secret. They feared the humans were spies gathering information to prepare for invasion. One of them said the humans had technology beyond anything they could match, and that it was only a matter of time before they demanded control. Another said they should act first, before it was too late. They began to plan without the knowledge of the council or Lyraean. They wanted to test the human ship to see how powerful it really was. That night, while the humans rested in their landing craft, a small drone launched from the lower city and rose toward orbit. It carried a small energy weapon designed to disrupt shields, not destroy, but disable. The plan was to send a warning shot to see how the humans would react. In the council hall, Lyran was still awake, speaking with Captain Ross through the communicator when alarm sounded again. The light in the room turned red, and a voice announced an unknown object approaching the human ship. Ross turned to his crew and ordered them to hold fire and raise shields. Lyrian's heart sank. She ran to the balcony and looked up at the sky where a faint light streaked upward through the clouds. Seconds later, the drone reached orbit and struck the edge of the aurora. A wave of blue energy flashed across the sky, but no explosion followed. The ship's shields held firm. Ross ordered a defensive scan, but did not return fire. He contacted Lyrian, immediately telling her that his ship had been attacked, but that he would not retaliate unless attacked again. His calm voice filled the council chamber, but the damage was done. Fear spread again through the city as people looked to the skies. Lyrian ran to the council and demanded to know who was responsible, but no one answered. The councilors looked at each other in confusion and shame. The next morning, the humans sent a message saying they would not leave but would wait for an explanation. Lyrian felt torn. She wanted to believe that her people could still fix this, but she also knew that trust was fragile. She went to see Ross in person, hoping to explain what had happened. When she arrived at the landing site, he was already waiting. She could see worry in his eyes, but also restraint. He said he believed her when she said it was not her doing, but warned her that his crew was nervous and ready to defend themselves if needed. Lyrian nodded, promising to find the truth over. The next few days she searched for answers, speaking to soldiers and council members, but no one admitted to anything. Still, she found traces of encrypted messages hidden in the city's network. She realized that a small faction was acting without permission, trying to provoke a response from the humans. She knew she had to stop them before it was too late. She met again with Ross and told him everything. She said that there were some among her people who still saw humans as threats. He listened, quietly, and then said that fear was something both their species knew too well. He told her that humans had faced the same divisions among themselves and had learned that peace required courage from both sides. That night, the ship Aurora sent a signal to the planet showing the images of Earth one more time. The blue oceans, the green lands, the faces of children and families. Lyrian watched from the balcony as the images played across the sky. Her people gathered below and stared in silence. The message was clear. It was not a threat, but a reminder that the visitors were people too, with lives, hopes, and dreams not so different from theirs. As the light faded, the fear in her heart began to ease. She looked up at the stars and whispered that maybe this was not the end, but only another test for both worlds. The days after the attack were filled with tension. The human ship still floated above Varine, silent but watchful. The people below looked up at it with fear and wonder, wondering if it would strike back. Captain Daniel Ross had chosen not to respond with violence, but everyone knew that one more mistake could change everything. Lyrian worked day and night trying to calm both sides. She spoke to her people, reminding them that fear only led to ruin. She sent messages to the human ship assuring them that most of Varine still wanted peace. The city lights that once shone in joy now seemed dim and cold, and the once calm air was heavy with worry. Inside the Aurora, Ross met with his officers. They argued quietly about what should be done. Some believed they should leave before things grew worse. Others said they should stay and prove that humans could be trusted. Ross listened to them, but his mind was set. He told them that leaving now would only prove the fears of the Varine right. He said that peace was not built in comfort, but in courage and patience. His crew agreed reluctantly. Maria Brooks stood by his side and said that if Lyrian could face her own people's anger, then they could do the same for theirs. Ross nodded, knowing the days ahead would test both of them more than any battle could. Lyrian called for another meeting of the council. She stood before them in the chamber filled with blue light and asked for honesty. She told them she knew that some had acted in secret trying to attack the humans. She demanded that they come forward and explain why they had done it. The room was silent until one older counselor finally stood. He said they feared what would happen if the humans stayed too long. They had seen other worlds fall to outsiders and did not want the same fate for Varine. Lyrian listened with calm and said that fear was not enough reason to betray peace. She said the humans had done nothing to harm them and had shown only patience and restraint. She reminded them that Varine's greatest strength had always been its ability to understand. Before it judged, her voice was quiet but steady. And when she finished, many of the counselors lowered their eyes. Outside the chamber, people began to protest. Some demanded that the humans leave at once. Others said they should stay until peace was truly made. The city became divided and rumors spread fast. Lyraean walked through the streets, seeing both anger and hope in the faces of her people. She knew the smallest spark could ignite chaos. She returned to her home that night exhausted and looked up at the dark sky where the ship still glowed faintly above the clouds. She wondered if her efforts were enough, if peace was something she could still hold together, or if it was already slipping away on the ship. Ross watched the planet below. He saw the crowds and the unrest, and knew that something had to change. He sent a message to Lyran asking to meet one last time, not in the council hall, but in a quiet place away from the noise. She agreed and arranged for a small meeting in the Crystal Garden outside the city. The next morning, as the suns rose, the small human shuttle landed there. The garden was filled with soft light, and the sound of wind moving through glass like leaves. Lyraean waited beside the glowing pool when Ross stepped down from the craft. He looked tired but calm, and when he saw her, he smiled faintly. They walked together without guards, only the two of them. Ross told her that he did not want to bring fear to her people, and that if it was better for them he would leave. Lyraean shook her head, saying that leaving would not heal the fear, only hide it. She said that trust was not built in one meeting, but through time and action. She said that the people of Varine needed to see that humanity was not what the old stories said. Ross looked at her and said that humans were not perfect, that they carried the weight of their past mistakes, but that they were learning. He told her that sometimes the hardest thing was to stand still and do nothing when the world expected you to fight. She nodded, saying that her people were learning the same lesson. Their talk lasted for hours as they shared stories about their lives. Ross spoke about the oceans of Earth and how his ancestors once crossed them in small wooden ships, searching for new lands. Lyran told him about the first travelers of Varine who had left their home cities to unite the planet. They both laughed softly, realizing how alike their worlds were even across the stars. When they returned to the edge of the garden, the suns were already setting, casting long golden shadows over the glass trees. Ross said that even if peace failed, he would remember Varine as the place where hope had begun again. Lyraean felt her chest tighten, but she said nothing as night came. A storm began to rise over the horizon. Lightning flashed through the clouds and thunder rolled across the plains. Lyraean returned to the council hall to find chaos. The secret faction had acted again. They had gathered weapons and were preparing to strike at the human ship directly. They believed that destroying it would free Varine from fear. She tried to stop them, calling for calm, but they would not listen. They had already launched another attack, a larger one aimed straight for the ship's orbit. Ross received the warning from his sensors just in time. The Aurora raised its shields again, the impact shaking the entire vessel. Alarms blared through the halls and the crew shouted for orders. Ross stood firm, telling them to hold position. He refused to fire back even as more energy blasts struck the shields. Lyraean watched from the balcony as bright lights tore across the sky. The city below panicked as explosions of light flashed like silent thunder. Her heart raced and she ran to the communication chamber, shouting for connection with the human ship. When Ross appeared on the screen, she saw the flickering light behind him and the steady calm in his eyes. He said that his ship would endure and that they would not fire. She begged him to leave to escape before her people destroyed themselves trying to fight him. He shook his head, saying that running would only leave behind more fear. He said that humans had faced worse storms and survived, and that he would not let peace die so easily. The council finally managed to stop the rogue group before they could fire again. The skies slowly cleared as the last of the weapons fell silent. The Aurora remained above the planet, damaged but still whole. Lyraean fell to her knees in relief. The people of Varine saw that the humans had not struck back, even after being attacked twice. The truth spread quickly across the cities, and for the first time the fear began to turn into shame. People realized that the visitors had shown restraint, and that maybe they had misjudged them. The next morning, the suns rose over a quiet world. Lyraean walked to the balcony again and looked up. The human ship was still there, floating like a small star. She sent a message to Ross, thanking him for his patience and his strength. He replied, saying that he believed in her people and that they would find their way. Ross promised that once his ship was repaired, he would remain until the council declared them truly welcome, or asked them to leave in peace. Lyraean smiled for the first time in many days. She knew the road ahead was still uncertain, but she also knew that something had changed. Her people had seen what kind of strength the humans carried, not strength of weapons, but strength of heart, and she hoped that someday they would carry the same. The days after the second attack were calm and strange. The people of Vareen no longer looked to the sky with fear, but with quiet wonder. The human ship still floated there, a symbol of patience and strength, and many now spoke of it as a light of hope rather than a threat. Lyraean walked through the streets again and saw children pointing up at the ship, smiling instead of hiding. Their laughter felt like the first sign that peace was possible again. The markets reopened fully, and the colors returned to the towers. The air seemed lighter, as if the planet itself had taken a deep breath after a long storm. Inside the council hall, Lyraean met with the elders once more. They spoke of rebuilding trust and finding a way to keep peace with the visitors. Some suggested trade. Some wanted shared knowledge. Others simply wanted to learn more about Earth. Lyraean listened and gave her thoughts carefully. She said that peace was not something signed on paper, but something built day by day through actions. The council agreed and voted to open an embassy for communication with the humans. It was the first step toward a bond that might last generations. Lyraean felt a small spark of pride knowing that she had helped make this moment possible. Up in orbit, the crew of the Aurora worked hard to repair the damage from the attack. The ship's hull was scarred, but the systems still worked. Captain Daniel Ross moved quietly through the corridors, helping where he could. His crew admired him for his calm strength. He never raised his voice, never showed anger, only quiet focus. When Maria Brooks asked why he was not returning to Earth to report, he said that their place was here until the story of peace was finished. He said, leaving now would be like walking away before the last page was written. She nodded, knowing he was right. A few days later, Lyraean sent a message inviting the humans to return to the surface to see the embassy they were building. Ross accepted and came down with a small team. The people of Vareen greeted them not with fear this time, but with gentle cheers and bright lights. The streets were lined with soft ribbons of color, and the air smelled of sweet fruit. The building that would become the embassy stood at the edge of the city, made from clear stone and living crystal, designed to blend with the world around it. Lyraean met them there, smiling for the first time in weeks. Ross told her it was beautiful, and she replied that beauty was easier to find. When fear was gone, they walked through the halls while builders worked around them. Lyraean explained that the embassy would be a place where humans and Vareen could share ideas, art, and science. Ross said that he hoped one day their worlds would work side by side, exploring the stars together. She said that maybe the stars wanted it too, because they had brought two very different worlds together at the right moment. For a while they simply walked in silence, the sound of wind and distant music filling the air. It was a peaceful silence full of promise instead of fear. Later that night, there was a small celebration in the open plaza. The people of Vareen danced and sang while lights floated above them like tiny stars. The humans joined, quietly smiling and watching. The music was soft and slow, and Lyraean felt the rhythm flow through her heart. Ross stood nearby, speaking with Maria, but his eyes often went to Lyraean, watching her move with the others. She saw him looking and smiled, shyly. He looked away for a moment, then stepped closer, saying that he had never seen such a sight on any world he had visited. She told him that maybe he had not looked closely enough before. He laughed softly, saying, "Maybe not." As the night grew deeper, the two of them walked to the edge of the plaza where the city lights met the open fields. The twin moons of Vareen rose high, casting silver light across the land. Ross told her that soon the Aurora would need to continue its journey. He said his orders were to explore beyond this region and report back to Earth. She felt a quiet sadness at his words, but she knew it was his duty. She asked if he would ever return. He said he hoped so, because some journeys were worth repeating. She told him that her people would remember him as the man who came from the stars and chose peace over war. He said he would remember her as the voice that made peace possible. In the days that followed, the embassy was completed. The council declared the humans as friends of Vereen, and a ceremony was held in the open square. Lorraine stood beside Ross as the people cheered, and light filled the sky. The air shimmered with colors from both worlds, the soft glow of Vereen's crystals mixed with the bright signal lights from the aurora. It was a moment that would be remembered in both histories. Ross gave a short speech saying that humanity had learned long ago that peace was not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. He said that he saw that same strength in the people of Vereen and believed that together they could face whatever came next. When the ceremony ended, Lyran walked with him to the shuttle that would take him back to his ship. She felt the weight of the moment pressing on her chest, but she smiled anyway. She told him that the stars would watch over him and that Vereen would always welcome him back. He thanked her, saying that she had changed how he saw the universe. She said that maybe the universe had only been waiting for humans to learn how to listen before sending them out to meet others. He looked at her for a long moment, then turned to board the shuttle. She watched as it rose into the air, glowing softly against the blue of the night sky. The aurora stayed for another week, then slowly began to move away from orbit. The people of Vereen gathered across the cities to watch as the great ship turned toward the stars. Its engines flared like a rising sun, and then it was gone, leaving only a faint shimmer. In the upper sky, Lyraean stood on the highest balcony of the council hall watching until the last trace of light faded. She felt both sadness and pride. Her world had changed forever, and she had changed with it. She whispered to herself that peace was never simple, but it was worth every trial, every loss, every hope. In the years that followed, stories of the humans became part of Vereen's songs. Children grew up hearing about the visitors from the stars who came in peace and left behind friendship. The embassy remained open, and new signals from other human ships began to arrive. The bond between the two worlds grew slowly but steadily. In quiet moments, Lyraean would still look to the sky, remembering the voice of Captain Ross and the strength he had shown without ever firing a single shot. One evening, long after the aurora had left, Lyraean stood again in the garden where she had once met Ross. The air was calm and full of glowing petals. She looked up at the stars and smiled softly, thinking of how small one world could be and how vast the universe truly was. She realized that the meeting between humans and Vereen had not been an ending but a beginning. The ship that had once brought fear had left behind hope, a light that would guide both worlds for generations to come. And as she stood there in the silver light, she whispered that maybe the universe was never silent at all. Maybe it was waiting for someone brave enough to listen.